The morning was quiet in the small Vermont town when Emily Carter unlocked the door to her flower shop. The bell above the door jingled, breaking the silence of early spring. The scent of roses and lavender filled the air, wrapping the room in calm familiarity. It was the same scent she had lived with for years, one that carried both comfort and loneliness. Emily had built this life piece by piece after her husband passed away. She found peace in flowers. They didn't demand words, only care. Her son Liam had left for New York years ago to chase his career, promising to visit often. But like most promises, time had quietly stolen it away. It had been almost 4 years since she last saw him. She'd gotten used to his absence, or at least convinced herself she had. That morning, she was trimming tulips when the shop door opened again. She didn't look up at first, assuming it was a customer. But when she heard that familiar voice, deeper now, steadier, she froze. "Mom?" Her scissors fell to the counter. She turned slowly, and there he was, Liam, taller, broader, and wearing that same smile that used to melt her heart when he was a boy. The years had changed him. His hair was shorter, his jawline sharper, but his eyes, those soft green eyes, were exactly the same. "Liam," she whispered, her throat tightening. "You're really here." He stepped closer, his smile faltering just a little. "I told you I'd come back one day." She laughed, wiping her hands on her apron, trying to hold back tears. "You said that 4 birthdays ago." He chuckled, guilt flickering in his eyes. "Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, Mom, I should have come sooner." Emily shook her head. "You're here now. That's what matters." They stood there for a long second, just looking at each other, both unsure what to say next. Time had stretched their bond thin, but not broken it. Finally, she reached out, pulling him into a hug that felt both strange and familiar. It was the kind of embrace that carries every missed conversation, every lonely night, every unsent message. When they pulled apart, Emily noticed the faint tiredness around his eyes. "You look different," she said softly. "Good different or bad?" She smiled. "Just grown." They sat by the counter as she made him tea, like she always used to. Liam told her about his job, how he'd been working for a company that downsized suddenly. He'd lost his apartment and decided maybe it was time to come home for a while, to figure things out. "I don't have much planned," he said with a small shrug. "I thought maybe I could stay here until I know what's next." Emily looked at him, her son, now a man, and felt something shift inside her. It wasn't worry, it was relief. After years of silence, her house would have laughter again. "Of course you can stay," she said without hesitation. "You'll always have a place here." He smiled gratefully. "Thanks, Mom." The rest of the day passed like a dream. Emily showed him around the shop, and he helped her lift boxes and move vases. He laughed at her old routines, how she still wrote invoices by hand and refused to use the tablet he'd sent her years ago. "Some things never change," he teased. "That's the point," she replied with a playful smile. "Not everything should." By late afternoon, the sun poured through the shop windows, painting golden light across the flowers. Emily caught herself watching him as he worked, the way he arranged the bouquets with quiet focus, the way his shoulders looked stronger, his movements slower, more deliberate. There was something calming about him, something steady that made the world feel safe again. That evening, they drove home together. The house looked the same, white paint a little faded, the porch still creaking. When they stepped inside, Liam paused, taking in the familiar scent of cedar and lavender. "You really didn't change anything," he said softly. "Didn't have a reason to," she answered. Over dinner, they talked for hours. He told her about the city, the noise, the people, the long nights that left him tired. She listened, feeling the ache of missed years, but also the comfort of having him near again. When the conversation grew quiet, Emily looked at him thoughtfully. "You know," she said, "I used to talk to your father every night. Even after he was gone, I'd sit by the window and pretend he was there." Liam's gaze softened. "I do that too sometimes," he admitted. "When things got hard, I'd think about how he used to handle problems. I guess I missed both of you more than I thought." Her eyes glistened. "Then you came home at the right time." They sat in silence after that, the kind that felt full instead of empty. The fire crackled softly, and for the first time in years, Emily didn't feel alone in her own house. Later that night, as she cleared the table, Liam stopped her. "Mom," he said quietly, "you don't have to do everything alone anymore." She tried to laugh it off. "Oh, I'm used to it." "I know," he said gently. "That's what worries me." She looked at him, seeing something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not the boy she raised, but a man who understood her in ways she hadn't expected. It made her chest tighten, not with sadness, but with something warm and unsettling. As she went to bed, she lay awake for a long time, listening to the faint sounds of Liam unpacking in the next room. Every thump, every soft laugh he made to himself, reminded her that life had quietly given her something back she didn't know she'd lost. Companionship, connection, hope. But beneath that comfort was a whisper of uncertainty she couldn't name. Maybe it was fear. Fear that this peace wouldn't last, that he'd leave again. Or maybe it was something deeper, a quiet realization that time changes people in ways the heart can't always understand. When she finally closed her eyes, she thought about the way he had looked at her across the dinner table, kind, protective, and grown. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like just a mother, but a woman again, one who wanted to feel seen, understood, and not invisible to the world. She didn't know it yet, but that night marked the beginning of something she could never have imagined. A chapter where love, in all its complicated forms, would find its way back into her life. And all it took to begin was that one simple yes. Yes, you can stay. The days that followed Liam's return felt like a season of quiet renewal in Emily's life. The old Vermont house, once too silent, now carried the sound of footsteps, laughter, and the steady rhythm of two lives slowly learning each other again. Emily hadn't realized how empty her world had been until Liam filled it with small things. The smell of coffee early in the morning, music playing faintly from his room, and the sound of someone whistling while fixing the fence outside. Every morning, he drove her to the flower shop, saying it gave him an excuse to enjoy the smell of fresh blooms. He helped arrange flowers, carry boxes, and talk with customers who remembered him as a boy. Emily would watch quietly as he spoke with them, polite, warm, always smiling, and she felt proud, though something else stirred in her chest, something she didn't have a name for. At night, they cooked together, a simple meal of pasta or soup. Liam teased her for over-seasoning everything, and she teased him for not knowing how to boil rice. Their laughter filled the spaces that once echoed only with the wind. Slowly, the distance that time had built between them began to fade. One evening, a soft rain tapped on the windows as they sat on the porch with mugs of tea. The world outside was wrapped in silver mist. Liam leaned back against the railing, his voice calm. "You ever get tired of this, Mom? The quiet?" Emily smiled faintly. "I used to. Then I learned to live with it. Silence can be a kind of peace." "But it's lonely," he said simply. She hesitated. "Sometimes, but you learn not to expect too much. It hurts less that way." He turned to her, his eyes steady, the way his father's used to be when he was about to say something serious. "You shouldn't have to get used to being alone. You've done everything for everyone else your whole life. Don't you think it's time someone stayed for you?" His words were soft but hit deep. Emily looked away, pretending to watch the rain. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," he said. "But maybe it's worth trying." The air between them grew still, heavy with things neither of them dared to say. Emily's heart ached, not in the way of loss, but in the strange, tender way of remembering what it felt like to be truly seen. She loved her son deeply, but lately, she had started noticing the man he had become. His quiet strength, his patience, his way of caring without saying much. It wasn't something she could ever voice, but it lived in the quiet corners of her mind, where guilt and warmth coexisted. That night, she dreamed of the past, of her husband, laughing in the kitchen, of Liam running in the garden, of the sound of 3 voices instead of 2. She woke up with tears she didn't understand. The next morning, Liam found her in the kitchen early, staring out the window. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Just thinking," she said, forcing a smile. "About how fast time goes." He sat across from her, resting his elbows on the table. "You know, I was scared to come back," he admitted. "I thought you'd moved on without me." She looked surprised. "Move on from you? Liam, you're my son. You're the only thing I never stopped waiting for." He smiled, a little embarrassed, a little touched. "Then I guess I'm staying longer than planned." And he did. Days turned into weeks. He repaired the old piano, fixed the porch swing, repainted the shutters. The house began to look alive again, like it had been waiting for his return. Emily found herself smiling more. The exhaustion that had lived in her bones seemed to fade. Sometimes she caught him watching her, not like a son watching a pea. Autumn came early that year. The maple trees around the Carters' old house turned gold and red, the air sharp with the smell of falling leaves. For Emily, the days had begun to move quickly, full of color and small moments that made her heart lighter. Liam's presence changed everything. The house no longer felt like a place of silence, but of laughter, meals shared, and long talks that stretched late into the night. Liam had started helping her with the flower shop more seriously now. He brought new ideas, rearranged the shelves, built a small wooden counter near the window. "You should let the light hit the flowers from this side," he said one morning. "They'll look happier." Emily smiled, shaking her head. "Since when do flowers have moods?" "Since they started living with you," he said, and she laughed, though the warmth behind his words stayed with her long after. They worked side by side every day. Sometimes they talked endlessly. Other times they said nothing at all, and it was enough. Emily noticed how calm she felt when he was near. The weight of years, the loneliness, the quiet grief, had begun to fade, replaced by something softer. It wasn't love the way she'd once known it, but it filled the same empty spaces. One afternoon, Liam returned from town carrying something bulky under a tarp. "What's that?" Emily asked as he dragged it into the living room. He grinned like a boy again. "A surprise?" When he pulled the cover away, Emily gasped. It was an old upright piano, worn but beautiful. She hadn't seen one in years. "You used to play," he said. "I thought maybe you'd want to again." Her throat tightened. "Where did you even find this?" "An estate sale. It needs tuning, but I can fix it." That evening, they sat together as he adjusted the keys, tapping and listening, while she watched quietly. The fire crackled, the rain outside whispered against the windows, and for the first time in so long, Emily felt time slow down. When he finally pressed the first few notes, the melody filled the house, wrapping around her like a memory come to life. She closed her eyes. "I forgot how much I missed that sound." He smiled softly. "Then let's make sure you never have to miss it again." There was a pause, gentle, heavy, meaningful. Emily looked at him and something inside her shifted. It wasn't about romance or longing. It was about being seen, valued, and cared for after years of silence. Days turned into weeks, and the piano became part of their routine. They played together in the evenings, sometimes singing old songs from her childhood. The neighbors often stopped outside to listen, saying later that it sounded like a story being told through music. But beneath the laughter and music, Emily could feel a quiet question growing inside her. What would happen when Liam decided to leave again? Would the silence return? Would she be able to go back to how things were? She didn't want to think about it, but the thought followed her everywhere. One cold afternoon, as they closed the shop early due to snow, Liam turned to her. "I've been meaning to ask you something." Emily looked up from her paperwork. "What is it?" He hesitated. "I've been offered a job in Boston. It's good, steady, but if I take it, I'll have to move again." The words hung in the air. Emily's heart sank, though she tried to smile. "That's wonderful, Liam. I'm proud of you." He frowned. "I didn't say I wanted to take it." She looked at him surprised. "You don't?" He shook his head slowly. "Not if it means leaving you alone again. Emily's breath caught. You don't have to stay for me, Liam. You've got your own life to live. He looked straight at her, his voice quiet, but certain. Maybe this is the life I want, helping you, being here. This feels right. She opened her mouth to speak but couldn't. Every part of her wanted to tell him to stay, but another part knew what it meant for him to give up his future. You'll regret it, she whispered. No, he said softly. I'll regret leaving. That night, they sat by the fire again, the silence thick with things neither of them dared to say. Emily's heart felt heavy and full all at once. She watched the flames flicker, thinking of all the years she'd spent wishing for someone to come back. And now that he had, she didn't know how to let him stay. Nellie, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. If you stay, Liam, I want it to be because you choose it, not because you feel sorry for me. He smiled faintly. You think I could ever feel sorry for you? You've built a life on your own. I'm the one who's been lost, Mom. Maybe being here is my way of finding something real again. She looked at him, her eyes soft with tears. There was no answer that felt right. Only the truth that he had spoken. That somehow, in the quiet of this small town, they had both found a piece of peace they didn't know they were missing. He leaned forward slightly. So what do you say? Should I stay? Emily hesitated. Every fear, every doubt, every lonely night of the past few years seemed to press against her chest at once. Saying yes felt dangerous. Not because it was wrong, but because it meant letting someone in again. It meant hope. Finally, she smiled through tears. Yes, stay. That one word, that one yes, changed everything. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was soft, like the quiet sound of snow falling outside. But in that moment, something new began. Not a new romance, not a fantasy, but a deep human connection between two hearts that had healed each other without even realizing it. From that day on, their lives fell into a rhythm that felt unshakable. They rebuilt the piano together, repaired old furniture, repainted the porch. The flower shop flourished with Liam's new ideas, and Emily found herself laughing more. Sleeping better, living again. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her as she worked, a calm, proud look in his eyes that made her heart ache in the best way. Other times she'd play the piano alone at night, smiling when she heard him humming along from the next room. She didn't know what the future would bring, but she knew that her yes had given both of them something they'd been missing: belonging. Winter melted quietly into spring, and with it came a new rhythm in Emily Carter's life. The days no longer felt heavy or slow. The mornings began with sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows, the smell of coffee, and Liam's voice humming softly as he read the newspaper. The world outside might have still been uncertain, but inside that little Vermont home, there was warmth, a steady, living kind of peace that Emily hadn't felt in years. Liam kept his promise and stayed. He didn't talk much about the job offer again, and Emily didn't ask. He seemed content, fixing things around the shop, planting flowers in the garden, taking care of small details she used to ignore. His presence filled every quiet space in her world. Sometimes, she wondered if it was selfish to be so grateful for it. But then she would see him smiling, genuinely happy, and her worries would fade. The flower shop became busier that spring. Customers came not just for flowers, but to see the mother and son who ran it together. People often commented on how well they worked as a team, how they seemed to understand each other without words. "You two make this place feel alive," one woman said once, watching them laugh as they arranged tulips. Emily smiled politely, though her heart trembled a little at the truth in those words. At home, the evenings were her favorite. They would eat dinner by the fireplace, talk about their day, and play music on the piano he had restored. The melodies carried through the house like gentle waves, soft, hopeful, and full of memory. Sometimes they didn't talk at all, and that silence felt like its own kind of love. Calm, unspoken, but deep. Yet as the weeks passed, Emily began to sense something different in Liam. It wasn't unhappiness, but restlessness. He often looked out the window at night, lost in thought. When she asked, he would smile and say, "Just thinking." But she knew that look. It was the same one she'd seen on herself for years, the feeling of wanting more from life, the fear of leaving behind something you love. One evening, she decided to ask. They were sitting outside, watching the sunset turn the sky into a sea of gold. "You've been quiet lately," she said softly. "Are you thinking about leaving?" He hesitated before answering. "I don't know. Part of me feels like I should go back to the city, start fresh. But then I think about you and this place. And I don't want to lose what we've built." Emily looked at him for a long time, her heart full. "You won't lose it," she said gently. "Life doesn't stop just because you take a step forward. You've given me so much, Liam. You don't owe me your whole life." He frowned slightly. "That's not what this feels like." "Then what does it feel like?" He thought for a moment, then said quietly, "It feels like home." Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him that she felt the same, that these months had given her back something she didn't think she'd ever feel again: closeness, laughter, purpose. But she also knew that love, in any form, wasn't about holding on too tightly. It was about giving someone the courage to move forward, even if it meant watching them go. That night, she sat at the piano alone, playing softly. The house felt warm but heavy with thought. Liam came down the stairs halfway through the song and stood in the doorway listening. When she finished, he said quietly, "I'm going to Boston for a few weeks, just to see how it feels." Emily nodded, her fingers still resting on the keys. "You should," she said. "And if it feels right, you should stay." He stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "And if it doesn't? Then you'll know where home is," she whispered. The next morning, she drove him to the bus station. They talked about small things. "We